Today, DIYers beware. The third wave of the asbestos disaster is with us. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, writing the latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. The full court of the Supreme Court of South Australia has rejected an appeal by James Hardie against a precedent-setting asbestos compensation claim, unanimously finding that the company owed the public a duty of care to warn them of the risks posed by in situ asbestos cement products. An Adelaide man suffering terminal cancer from breathing in asbestos dust has defeated an appeal against his compensation claim, but will receive $850,000 less than in the original judgment. Father of three, Matthew Werfel, received $2.23 million in compensation from the company that used to be James Hardie, instead of the $3.08 million awarded by the South Australian Employment Tribunal last year. In a judgment handed down recently, the full court of the Supreme Court of South Australia upheld the tribunal's decision in favour of Mr. Werfel that James Hardie owed a duty of care to people that used its products. However, the court criticised Judge Leonie Farrell for copying reasons for her judgment from Mr. Werfel's claim. Mr. Werfel, who's 44, said he hoped the Supreme Court's decision would force James Hardie, now known as Amacal Proprietary Limited, to undertake a public health campaign to ensure all Australians were aware of the risks posed by asbestos products. Mr. Werfel was exposed to the deadly material while pulling down fences and renovating two homes between the late 1990s and early 2000s, unaware that they contained asbestos. He was diagnosed with a rare form of mesothelioma in 2017 after he discovered a lump on the inside of his right leg. There was no wheezing or shortness of breath, because the tumour was not in his lungs, but one of the rare cases where it develops in the testicles. He has been given just 2 years to live. Mr. Werfel's lawyer, Annie Hoffman, described Mr. Werfel as among the third wave of asbestos victims, those people doing renovations after the first wave made up of miners and millers, and the second wave of tradespeople. She said the decision extended James Hardie's legal liability to all those who may come into contact with its products. And the full court confirmed that James Hardie had a duty of care to the public to warn them of the ongoing risks posed by their asbestos products and remain legally liable for the lives those products continue to destroy, she said. The decision sets a precedent for any person who contracts mesothelioma due to drilling, sanding, cutting, or handling James Hardie asbestos cement in their homes. Along with complaining about the judge's reasons and the compensation figure, James Hardie denied that it had a relevant duty of care to Mr. Werfel, or that it breached that duty of care, or that any breach caused the plaintiff's injury. Chief Justice Chris Kourakis, Justice Kevin Nicholson, and Justice Mark Livesey said by 1980 James Hardie knew that there was some risk from asbestos, and by 1990 had a duty of care to people working with its products. They said the fact that Mr. Werfel was a workplace safety representative strongly supports the inference that he would have taken recommended precautions if there had been warnings about the James Hardie fencing material he was working on. However, they criticised Judge Farrell for copying 71 of 91 pages of Mr. Werfel's written submissions verbatim in giving the reasons for her judgment. They reduced various aspects of Mr. Werfel's compensation, saying some of the calculations were affected by error and manifestly excessive. The appeal against liability is dismissed, they said. The appeal against damages is allowed in part, the judgment stated. And in a statement, a spokeswoman for James Hardy said the company was not involved in the management of claims against Arkema or any of the other former group companies. We are therefore unable to comment on this case or provide answers to your questions, the spokeswoman said. Today's case and all claims are managed by the Asbestos Injuries Compensation Fund. Mr. Werfel welcomed the final court decision, saying he hoped it would finally force James Hardy to undertake the extensive public health campaign needed to ensure all Australians were aware of the risks posed by asbestos products. I'm extremely thankful for this outcome, which will at least provide financial security for my wife and children when I'm gone, he said. Compensation doesn't make up for the decades of life I have been robbed of by James Hardy's negligence. I will miss out on so many important milestones that most people take for granted, such as seeing my daughters grow up and having families of their own. The case was never about me, he said. From day one, we were fighting on behalf of everyone across Australia who continues to be unknowingly exposed to James Hardy's deadly asbestos products in their homes, workplaces and schools. The full court unanimously shared our view that James Hardy owed the community a duty of care to run an extensive public health campaign warning of the ongoing risks posed by their asbestos products. My hope is that the lasting legacy of my legal battle will be James Hardy finally taking responsibility for their past actions and devoting the millions of dollars needed to get the message out to every Australian about the asbestos risks that continue to lurk in the community. If I can prevent even one other person from contracting a deadly asbestos disease, this legal fight would have been worth all the energy we put in. Mr. Werfel's solicitor, Turner Freeman Lawyers partner Annie Hoffman, said the case would have far-reaching consequences for anyone who contracts mesothelioma as a result of undertaking home renovations. This judgment has significant far-reaching implications for third-wave asbestos victims, those exposed to asbestos products that still remain in millions of homes, workplaces and public buildings, she said. The decision extends James Hardy's legal liability beyond the products they sold to end users to all those who may come into contact with those products in future, including those who are still being exposed during home renovations. The full court confirmed that James Hardy had a duty of care to the public to warn them of the ongoing risks posed by their asbestos products and remains legally liable for the lives these products continue to destroy. This decision sets a precedent for any person who contracts mesothelioma due to drilling, sanding, cutting or handling James Hardy asbestos cement in their homes. The court unanimously agreed with our argument that James Hardy had an obligation to run a public awareness campaign to warn the Australian public about what these products look like, where they are found, and what to do to avoid asbestos exposure. Sadly, James Hardy's asbestos cement building products can still be found in homes, schools, workplaces and public buildings built before 1983, where they continue to pose a significant threat to public health, with many people still at risk of being unknowingly exposed to this deadly fibre. Now, of course, for me this is personal because my wife has been exposed to asbestos and has the disease. And it's worth noting that even a minor exposure of just a few fibres sometime in the past is more than sufficient to create cancer and ultimately death. So this is a big deal, and therefore this is a warning to all those who are undertaking renovations, in older properties in particular, that there may well be asbestos in the walls, floors, ceilings, and even in a range of other products. And worryingly, asbestos was also used in water piping across Australia. And as a result of that, there is asbestos in places you wouldn't even dream of looking. So this warning is for anybody considering DIY, check for asbestos. Don't take risks because the consequences are very significant and, frankly, life-threatening. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.